So the Western road trip has come and gone. The Montreal Canadiens are back home, an off day today. Tomorrow, they'll be back at it in preparation for this weekend's game against the Ottawa Senators. But ahead of that, we need to take a look back and see the good, the bad, and the ugly from this road trip and the emergence, possibly, of some new leaders on this team that I don't think a lot of people thought would get off to a good start. Let's talk some puck. Hey gang, Kosta here from PuckTalk Montreal. Welcome to this October 29th, 2025 edition of the show. And I thought that today would be a great opportunity for us to look back and see the good, the bad, and the ugly from this road trip out west. Now, there was a lot of good. No argument to be had there. There was a little bit of ugly, and there's some bad. But overall, the Canadiens coming back with a tremendous record, now 8-3 on the season, first in the Atlantic Division as we speak. There's a lot to be said about the Montreal Canadiens right now and the start they've got off to. There was a lot of urgency early on in the preseason from Coach Marty St. Louis. It looks like that message got across to his players and they're contributing. Whether it's line 1 through line 4, everybody's got their part. But before we move any further, let's take care of a little bit of business and mention our partners. InstaCustoms.com is Canada's highest rated print shop with over 3,000 Google reviews and a 4.9 star rating. They offer direct-to-garment printing on all your favorite clothing, along with coffee and travel mugs, and they even offer embroidery. Habs won a Stanley Cup? You can win too on Stanley Street at InstaCustoms.com. CheapersTshirts.ca has men's, women's, and children's t-shirts, all sizes, hoodies too. With over 1,000 products to choose from, anything you need for merchandise or the best deals on everyday clothing, CheapestTshirts.ca is your go-to source. Buy today, ship tomorrow, CheapestTshirts.ca. Now, when we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm going to start with the ugly because there wasn't a lot of it, but it was enough to really affect the team moving forward. One of them that we saw was, of course, that badly officiated game in Edmonton. And it allowed the Montreal Canadiens to recognize just how much emotion factors into their game. They lost their composure, and in turn, it cost them the hockey game. Now, that's not to say that it wasn't justified. What the officials did on the Matheson penalty and on the subsequent unsportsmanlike conduct penalty to Josh Anderson, it's mind-blowing. And the fact that the NHL hasn't even come forward to mention it or even fine the Montreal Canadiens for their words post-game speaks volumes. I don't think the NHL has to come out and say anything at this point. They realize that their two officials screwed the pooch. And so in not fining Marty St. Louis or any of the players for what they said after the game, it just shows that the league said, you know what, guys, we're going to give this one to you because we were wrong. And let's move forward. And I think it's the right way to handle it. Of course, internally, I'm sure there's going to be discussions with the officials, maybe some additional training, some review of the videos to see what went wrong. And of course, there's going to be a little bit of talk to them about implicating themselves in the hockey game to influence the decision and not allowing the players to actually dictate how the game was going to finish. I think that's the biggest issue that came out of that debacle in Edmonton. The other ugly thing, of course, that came during this road trip was the news about Patrik Laine and his need for abdominal surgery. Now, the surgery went well. His recovery is anywhere between 3 and 4 months. But it wasn't just that news that was ugly. What came out afterwards in regards to Patrik Laine himself and how happy people were that he was no longer in the lineup, it made me sick. There's a certain level of, vitriol in this town for players that don't perform. And it goes without saying that Patrik Laine wasn't performing on an offensive level to start the season. Defensively, however, and I've mentioned this in multiple shows, he was showing improvement in his own zone and at 5-on-5. And if you wanted to give Patrik Laine more minutes, to be able to give him the opportunity to actually score more goals at 5-on-5, the first thing he had to clean up was, of course, his defensive game, because you don't want him to be a liability out there. And he was doing just that. He wasn't focusing on, getting up into the zone, jumping the zone early. He was staying back, making sure he took care of his responsibilities in-house, and then moving up the ice with his line mates. Sure, Patrick Laine is not the most fleet of foot. His skating style has a very wide base. He moves up the ice kind of like a tree trunk on a river, slow, methodically. But when he moves his feet, he moves. He's a big man. So for you to say that he's not fast, no, he's not Speedy Gonzalez. He's not going to win races against guys like Russ Courtnall or Yvan Cournoyer. But the one thing that he can do is be very strong on his feet, powerful on his feet, driving the net and doing things that work for him. Now, coming off the knee injury, we all thought, okay, he worked all summer. He's going to be a lot better. God knows what it takes to tear your stomach muscle. It's not something that you hear about every day, and it's certainly not an injury that you see very often in hockey. But, you know, the body's a fickle thing. And so before you sit there and you start throwing darts at Patrick Laine for his lack of scoring to start the season, think about the fact that the Montreal Canadiens came out and other players were scoring. You had Oliver Kapanen. You had Alex Newhook, Ivan Demidov, Juraj Slafkovsky, of course, Cole Caufield, Nick Suzuki. Your usual suspects were scoring at a very nice clip. So there was no urgency in Patrick Laine's game to score goals. If he got them on the power play, great. But because he wasn't on that first unit, he wasn't afforded that opportunity either too often. He got less time than the first unit, and so it was what it was, and he didn't get that one-timer off from the office. But for him to get injured, and then for people, and it's not all fans, I'm not going to paint everybody with the same brush, but a lot of the French media who were talking about getting Patrick Laine out of town now got their wish, because Patrick Laine is going to be out for 3 to 4 months. And that's not something anybody should be happy about. Yes, you want to see guys get opportunities, but opportunities on a hockey team are earned. They're not given. So when you talk about Zach Bolduc got out to a quick start with 4 goals, and now in the last couple of games, he's kind of fizzled. I'll get to why in a sec. But, you know, you can't say that, oh, Zach Bolduc's got to be given more ice because no. How do you know that the amount of ice time for Zach Bolduc as it stands right now isn't perfect, given his skill set and his abilities? Maybe his body can't handle more minutes just yet. A lot of times, in certain situations, players digress and they aren't as good when they play longer minutes. They lose focus because they get fatigued and they make mistakes. Maybe that's what Marty St. Louis is trying to avoid in the case of somebody like Bolduc, who's still getting used to the Canadian system. He's not a guy who's been around for 2-3 years like Slafkovsky, Caufield, and Suzuki, who have been well ensconced in Marty's concepts. And so they understand exactly what the coach expects from them. Bolduc is still learning. It's a different team. Last season with the St. Louis Blues, I'm sure things were completely different. Different systems, different type of play, different ability to score, different energy expenditure. So let's stop with all of this. Wanting players not to be in the lineup is the dumbest thing I've heard from anybody. And that is also true when we talk about Sam Montembeault. Nobody wants to see somebody lose their job, right? And that's what everybody's talking about Montembeault doing. I'm not looking to see Jakub Dobes become the number 1 goaltender right here and now, because he still has work to do on his game. Sam Montembeault has work to do on his game because he seems to have lost it. Now, I got a little bit of information that I'm going to share with you later in the show about what Sam Montembeault did over the summer to try to augment his game. And after I learned what it was, kind of think that maybe it was a mistake to do it. But anyway, I'll get to that later. Now let's move on from the really ugly to the bad. One of the things that was bad for the Montreal Canadiens during this trip was asset management. And when I say asset management, I mean specifically the defensemen and some of the forwards. 2 defensemen in particular being Arbor Xhekaj, Jaden Struble. Those 2 guys got limited ice time. And granted, they did not do themselves any favors by taking stupid penalties. But there's one thing that I learned a long time ago in coaching, and that is you can't punish a player for trying to correct a mistake. What you can do is point it out and move forward from there. Now, oftentimes what happens when players take penalties is that they're fatigued during a shift and they make a wrong decision that gets them on the wrong side of the puck. It happened with Arbor Xhekaj. It happened last night, in effect, with Jaden Struble when he took the hooking penalty. It cost the Canadiens dearly as Shane Wright scored. Was it Shane Wright's goal? No, I think it was Montour's goal that they scored on the power play to get back into the hockey game. Those are the penalties that you need to watch because those are fatigue-based and judgment-based. And when a player's judgment is off, it can factor into things long-term. But you also can't just turn around and say, okay, you got a penalty, sit down. It's not the way to coach a player. It's not a way to develop a player. God knows that Struble and Xhekaj are still learning the game, right? They haven't gotten 15, 16, 20 minutes in a hockey game to say, okay, guys, you're ready to, take on a full role on this hockey team. And nobody expects them to, given where they are depth-wise in the lineup. But when you're talking about playing somebody 6 minutes in a hockey game, I mean, that borderlines on insanity because you're effectively handcuffing your team and forcing them to play with just 5 defensemen, incurring more fatigue on your D, which in turn can lead to more mistakes. So it's important to make sure that you keep the ice time regular, even when they make mistakes. And if you don't like their game, take them out of the bloody lineup. There's a reason why you've got Del Gaizo on the trip with you. If you didn't like Xhekaj's game and you didn't like Struble's game, then pull them out of the lineup, put Del Gaizo in since he's got NHL experience with the Nashville Predators. You're not hurting yourself by putting a guy in who was playing at the National Hockey League level last season. Sure, he's playing with the Rocket right now, given the depth of the Montreal Canadiens, but Del Gaizo can be a serviceable fill-in, especially in the absence of Caden Cooley. You can't limit yourself to those 6 guys, and sometimes you need to take that one guy that's making those mistakes and put him up in the press box, let him eat a couple of hot dogs, and watch as his replacement fills in and kind of shows him the right way to do things. There's no guarantee that he will, but at least from up high, and I'm talking about this from experience, a player can recognize play formations, play recognition, and decide for himself where he thinks a particular player should go, and then see how that fares. And, it's a learning experience for guys that are in the press box. It's not a punishment. So you put them up there for a game. You let those guys go get in there. And what happens? Well, your player learns something. You sit down as a coach with the player and you say, okay, you sat in the press box yesterday. What did you learn? Take it from there. Okay? It's as simple as that. But punishing your defensemen on a regular basis because they take a penalty, I mean, granted, in Arbor Xhekaj's case, he took 2 penalties in one hockey game, and I get the reasoning behind it. But in Struble's case, to limit his ice time, I mean, come on, man. The guy was playing a good game until he took that penalty, and then after that, you barely saw him on the ice. It's not what you need to do as a coach, okay? You turn around, you tell him, we're not going to do that again, Struby? And you move forward from there. Whether or not that was done, we don't know. But the limiting of the ice time, especially for defensemen, and overtaxing your top 4D is definitely not a direction that you want to take on a regular basis, especially in a league where your team plays back-to-back 17 times or 16 times in a single season. It's ludicrous, and it's suicide as far as your team's concerned. Another thing that was ugly was the play of Sam Montembeault, and I mentioned that before. Monty's lost it as far as his game is concerned. Sure, in the Edmonton game, there were a couple of deflections that went in on him early in the hockey game. Can't really fault him for those. But the 4 goals after that, if there's one thing that you depend on, especially from the guy that you've deemed to be your number 1, is that when push comes to shove, you need a save. And Monty didn't give that to the Canadiens at any time. In fact, since the preseason, he hasn't looked himself. Now, I found out from one of our listeners that in the summer, Montembeault was doing some work with a company by the name of Neuroactive, based out of Trois-Rivières in the province of Quebec. And his explanation was that they put him in some kind of a gyro-type apparatus and had him try to recognize and hit targets, right? And it got me to thinking. I've worked with goaltenders before with electronic equipment. And if there's one thing that I've done, it's never been to disorient a goaltender by spinning him around and then forcing him to hit a target. There's two things that are wrong with that particular type of thinking. Number one, you're not trying to hit a target. The target's trying to hit you, and that target's the puck. Okay? You are the last line of defense in front of a 6x4 target for the opposing team. So you're not trying to hit what's coming, what is out there. You're trying to stop what's coming at you. So if you're going to disorient a goaltender, number one, he's never going to be able to pick up on what you're trying to teach him because the targets are everywhere. If there's one thing that I pointed out with Monty's game is, number one, he needs to recognize how far out from the crease he comes. And one way to do that, if you want to use electronic equipment, is with programmable lights. And what you do is you place them around the crease in 6 or 7 different spots. And you have the goaltender slide out and in to each one of those spots as the lights change. We used to use this at my old DSK hockey camp. And basically what it did was, as opposed to forcing him to stop a puck, it forces him to be able to use his complete vision to see the lights around him. Okay? Whether it's through the periphery or forcing him to turn his head a little bit to see what's going on. Because if you go back and watch the video of all the Canadiens games thus far, the ones that Montreal played, the ones that Dobes played, while plays are going on, you always see Sam Montreal fixated on the puck, like he's got blinders on. But when you look at Jakub Dobes, he does what defensemen do when they go into the corner. He gives a little shoulder check. Not for anything else but to see what's going on around him. If there's a player coming out from behind the goal line, if he sees him, he'll know that there's a possibility of passes coming that way. So he'll slide across differently than if nobody was there. Those are the type of things that Monty isn't seeing. So what you need to do is put things out there that he's not going to see is there originally. His recognition of what goes on around him on the periphery needs to be different. The other part that Monty struggled with is pucks from distance, tracking them as they're coming in. If you were to put a target at distance, the target's stationary. All right? So it's not coming at you. It's not changing direction. It's not possibly fluttering. It's there. What you want to do is anything that comes from distance, you want it to be coming from distance so you can see it, track it, get out to it, and stop it. But that's not what he worked on over the summer, according to what we learned. So what does Monty have to do? Well, number one, he's got to stop with this new age type of training in the summer. Stick to the basics and stick to what you know works. What works? What has worked with him so far? Well, working with Eric Raymond hasn't gone as well as you'd like. So maybe hire a second goalie coach, somebody who gives you a little bit of a different perspective. And that's not something that's not uncommon, right? Teams hire their own goalie coaches, like the Canadiens had Stéphane Wade. The Islanders had another goalie coach other than Mark Champagne, when Jaro Halak was there, because Halak preferred working with Mark. And there's other cases where goalies have personal goalie coaches that they work with over the summer and not necessarily the team's goalie coach. It gives them perspective. It gives them differentiation. And it allows them to expand their skill set. Monty didn't do that this summer. Instead, he focused on his visualization, which is okay, but it was the wrong way to go about it. The other part that's ugly to me is the Canadiens' penalty kill, especially late in hockey games. The thing about their penalty kill early in games, where it's been extremely good, is when the puck's in their zone and teams are setting up, the Canadiens are much more aggressive. They push towards the puck carrier, forcing him to make plays sooner rather than later and forcing mistakes. The later in the game they get, the slower they become in reacting because they're fatigued, especially on a long road trip where you had a back-to-back to start. You know the guys are going to be fatigued by the time the third period rolls around, and you saw it in the last couple of games with the Habs where they dropped leads in the third period. You need to make sure that you're able to maintain a certain level of reaction and mental awareness throughout the hockey game. The more fatigued you are, the less clearly you can think. So what do? Well, you make sure that everybody gets balanced time on the ice. I come to that because the Bolduc, Veleno, and Doc line has averaged about 10 minutes a hockey game during this trip. The problem with that, simply put, is that the other three lines get overly taxed, especially the top two. The Veleno line isn't used most of the time on the penalty kill. Instead, you've got Evans and Anderson out there. Why not start a penalty kill with Veleno and Bolduc? If you're going to limit their ice time, okay, and you're not going to play them at 5-on-5 as much as maybe everybody would like, maybe it's time to start thinking outside the box and say to yourself, you know what? I've got 2 penalty kill units. I'm going to vary when I start them. Defensive zone face-off, listen, I don't have a problem with you putting Jake Evans out there to start. But the minute Jake Evans gets possession and the puck is cleared down the ice, let him go to the bench, let Veleno come out. Let him do some work. The same holds true for Bolduc. Instead of starting Josh Anderson all the time, put Bolduc in there. This way Anderson's a little less fatigued, and you give Bolduc some extra ice time for where he can be productive. You never know. Between guys like Veleno and Bolduc, God knows that those guys are going to be able to produce something offensively even when shorthanded. So why not take that chance? What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to get scored on? It's happening anyway late in hockey games. So why not just try to mitigate the damage and allow guys a little bit more ice time on the penalty kill? The penalty kill can't be passive. We've seen that for the Montreal Canadiens. The more passive it is, the more goals they allow. Okay, so you need to make sure that the guys that are up at the top of your box, normally Evans and Anderson, or Veleno and Bolduc, or Nick Suzuki, or whoever might be out there, you need to make sure that they're able to get to puck carriers quickly so that they use active sticks to block passing lanes and they force them to make plays the way they don't feel comfortable. And so that's what I want to see from the penalty kill. It needs to be better, especially late in hockey games. Now, let's take all the negativity and push it aside, and let's look at all the good that came out of this Western road trip. And it starts with Juraj Slafkovsky. I can't remember the last time a player has been able to emerge this clearly and this decisively early on in the season. Rarely does Juraj Slafkovsky use a puck battle. Rarely has he made a bad pass to any of his line mates. Rarely has he made a bad decision with the puck. And those are all things that he did last season. Why? Probably because he felt pressured to make plays, right? Especially later in the season. When we saw him make cross-ice passes in the neutral zone that were ill-advised right by his own blue line that oftentimes turned back the other way for scoring chances for the opposition. He's not doing that anymore. He's moving his feet more often, and he's not stationary. He's using his energy. It's all stuff that he worked on in Slovakia over the summer. And those are all positive points. He's bringing it all to the table. He's become a much more complete hockey player, and that's benefiting the Montreal Canadiens. In fact, his physicality is benefiting Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield. Suzuki on a 10-game point heater right now, and Caufield tied for the league in goals. So all that to say that, we expect Cole Caufield to be good for the Montreal Canadiens and score goals. We expect Nick Suzuki, to be a leader for the Montreal Canadiens. But Juraj Slafkovsky, right now, the way he's playing, he's showing leadership that we haven't seen yet. And that's awesome because that rubs off on the next line down the list. And that is another one that's producing. Alex Newhook, Oliver Kapanen, and Alex Demidov. Yes, we talk about them getting extra ice time. But here's the thing that everybody should recognize. And that is, even early last season, Lane Hutson wasn't on the ice all the time. Lane Hutson was on the second power play unit, and his ice was limited. But the Montreal Canadiens have moved Demidov to the first power play unit in Patrick Laine's absence, and that's brought some benefit to the Canadiens. His ability to move the puck, all worldly. His ability to shoot, that clapper the other day from the dot, there's nobody in the world that's stopping that shot. And his vision is elite. So you want to give him more ice time, but you got to limit it because you don't want him to, for lack of a better term, lose his load and, bear it all out there for 15, 16 minutes and become fatigued. Let him progressively get into the hockey game. Let him take some more body checks. Let him create more plays. Let him get used to the smaller ice surface a little bit more. Because we know on the power play, when he's got open space, he's dangerous.
At 3-on-3, we haven't seen him yet in overtime, but I'm sure he's going to be just as dangerous because you give that guy open space and you're done for. So I don't want to see him get too much extra ice time right now. 12 to 14 minutes is the wheelhouse for Demidov. As the season progresses, I expect it to become more and more because I expect Marty to trust the captain and line as a whole at 5-on-5 more and more and more. He's not going to have a choice. With Line A out and Volino centering the third line, I mean, the only other line you could trust at this point fully is the Evans line. So let Demidov, Kapanen, and Newhook slowly build the confidence of the coach. They haven't done anything wrong. God knows they haven't given up a bad goal. They haven't made a bad play in their own zone, right? Other than the other night where Demidov lost a net front battle because he didn't realize Elias Peterson was there against Vancouver, and it wasn't his man to begin with. But other than that, you really haven't seen Demidov in a wrong defensive position, have you? The same holds true for Kapanen. Kapanen defensively is outstanding for that line. So you've got guys that like Newhook and Demidov who are offensively gifted, and then you've got that presence in the middle defensively of a Kapanen who can be good at both ends of the ice. It's only all positive for the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, defensively, you take a look, and the one guy that we never thought was going to be as important for the Canadiens to start the season and that's Mike Matheson. I personally need to apologize because early on in the year, I didn't think there was space for Mike Matheson on this hockey team. I was wrong. The fact that he can lead the way he does, the way he's playing, limiting the amount of turnovers, I don't remember an egregious one yet. Okay, leading the troops on the back end, showing the way it's done, being solid with passes, being good in his own zone, the whole 9 yards. I never expected that from Mike Matheson. After the season he had last year, I thought, maybe he had turned the corner towards the wrong end of his career, but I was dead wrong. He is still just as effective, just as good as he was 2 years ago. And that's great for the Montreal Canadiens because they need that leadership, especially in the absence of Caden Gooley. The other thing, too, is Noah Dobson. Noah Dobson has not made any of his quote-unquote turnovers that made him famous in Long Island. He's got a partner out there who's responsible in Matheson, and they limit those turnovers. It's great. And it allows him the confidence to go up and help the offense out. It's one of those things that Patrick Waugh complained about in Dobson's game, that he didn't focus enough on that side of the game. Well, he is now. He's playing well on both sides of the puck, and the Canadiens are reaping the benefits of the Islanders pulling the trigger on a trade they probably shouldn't have made, because I'm sure they can use Dobson's defensive presence on their blue line. But it is what it is. We have them now. They got their 2 picks. Sayonara. And up front, during this Western road trip, there's not a single player that took time off. They all worked hard. From line 1 through line 4, there was nobody that you could actually call a liability. And that's great news, because we've seen games out west, or games in general, where players look like they checked out, where they're not interested anymore, where the trip's coming to an end, let's just mail it in. Mailing it in became famous in Major League Baseball at the end of long road trips, where you play a series of 3 or 4 games at a time against your opponent. So when teams like the Montreal Canadiens go out on Western road trips for 3, 4, 5 games at a time, the last one's kind of that mail-in game, but it wasn't. The Canadiens remained just as engaged in that game as they did any game during the road trip, and that's freaking great. And then the final good thing on this trip was, of course, the play of Jakub Dobes. But you could see, as the trip continued, you could see how he was starting to become a little bit fatigued because his rebound control was off. His goaltending was a little bit, his movements were a little bit less firm than they were earlier on in the trip. So you could see that fatigue was starting to set in, which is why I've said that the Canadiens should start Martebo on Saturday, right? I know that it's going to be a 3-4 game break for Dobes up until that point, but I think you need to give him that game off and give Monty a little bit of, here you go, man. You've been a good soldier. You've been a good, veteran leader, for lack of a better term, because he is a veteran goaltender after all. We're throwing you a bone. Let's see what you can do. Let's see what you can do against these Ottawa Senators. And it's a big game. It's not, it's an in-division game. It's not as if the Canadiens are just trying to throw it away. And there's no guarantees yet that Montembeault will start that game. But I'm hoping he does. You know, for all the criticism I have of Montembeault, there's one thing that as a former goaltender myself I can appreciate. It's a second chance. And I think Montembeault, given how patient he's been and the work he's put in, I think he deserves another chance. And it'll allow the goalie coach, Eric Raymond, to actually see what he does on the ice and provide more correction if there are any to continue with. Or if he sees that he's starting to correct what, you know, ailed him as far as being able to track pucks, recognizing plays in front of him, then I think Eric Raymond's doing his job and he should continue doing that. But if he's not getting better at play recognition, then that's the point where maybe the Canadiens need to take a look at getting rid of Eric Raymond. And I'm not going to go into creating a show about that. I posted one during the preseason about Eric Raymond. If you want to go back into the archives and take a look, please do. And of course, as always, make sure you give our little videos a thumbs up so that the algorithm can like us and spread the word out to other people. And while we're on the subject, I also want to thank all of you. The channel has reached 3,100 subscribers. It continues to grow, and the growth would not be there if not for the ones that have been faithful from the beginning. So for that, I thank you. I also thank our partners, Insta Customs and cheapesttshirts.ca. And we'll be back tomorrow with a little bit more from PuckTalk Montreal. I said Montreal Hockey Talk. Geez, I got to get used to that, eh? From PuckTalk Montreal. Bye for now.